Today I just wanted to talk,
Right.
no worries. Today I just wanted to talk about a couple of things, namely just the use cases that are currently live on Hedera. It sounded like there was some interest in understanding what some of those real world use cases are. And so I thought I'd start out by just talking a little bit about the Hedera ecosystem as it looks today, a little bit about the network, and then move into both some live real world use cases and how they leverage the Hedera services, in addition to where we think the biggest opportunities lie with Hedera. And then we can open it up for questions. A little bit about myself before I forget. I lead strategy for the HBAR Foundation, which is the growth and kind of accelerator arm within the Hedera ecosystem. Prior to Hedera, I ran token listings and crypto partnerships for an exchange called OKCoin, which is part of the OK Group, which also is kind of the home to the crypto exchange OKX. Prior to that, I did some strategy consulting through Gartner, and that's kind of how I kind of started in my crypto journey, I would say. I've been in crypto since 2018. Since then, we've had a number of bull and bear markets, and so as always, it's a little bit of a wild ride. But I think with each passing year, I remain very committed and passionate that this is definitely the forefront of tech and where I see a lot of innovation happening. So with that, I'll go into what the Hedera ecosystem looks like today. So as you know, this is a masterclass hosted by DLT Science Foundation, and they're really great at supporting educational initiatives like this one. We have sister organizations. One is called Swirls Labs that manages product engineering and marketing. And we also have one called the Hashgraph Association, focused a lot on kind of systems integrators and kind of that type of technical and consulting work. Specifically, the HBAR Foundation really is designed to support growth within the HBAR ecosystem. We do that through a number of venues, including things like financial support, technical support, and marketing support. Since we launched in, I believe, late 2021, we've supported 225 projects and have allocated a fair amount of money to support these initiatives as well. The foundation is structured thematically, and we've structured our funds around these themes that we think are very important. The first is crypto economy, generally how we can enable financial activity on Hedera. Generally, what that means in the past couple of years is that it's been very crypto native DeFi focused projects, which we think has been very important in bringing Hedera up to kind of its peers and kind of really fulfilling its destiny as a strong layer one. We have consumer engagement, generally how we can enable brands to have Web3 experiences in both a physical and digital way with their consumers. We have a payments and fintech, which is really a sister fund and sister theme to our crypto economy, which really is about utilizing things like tokenization and stable coins and CBDCs and making sure that we can support the fintech companies and financial organizations that are looking to build on Hedera. And then we also have sustainable impact, which is about bringing the balance sheet of the planet on chain and really focusing on making kind of green, auditable markets, sustainable markets. We also have two partner managed funds. One is on female founders. So, we believe very passionately that it's important to have more diversity within kind of tech and within the founder set. And we also have one focused on privacy. So understanding, from a thematic perspective, how DLT and Hedera can be used for privacy preservation. And we've seen a lot of applications within the healthcare space, which has been very exciting. The network itself is unique. So unlike other layer ones, say like Bitcoin or Ethereum, Hedera is technically not a blockchain, right? It uses what's called a directed acyclic graph and uses a gossip about gossip and virtual voting mechanism that essentially allows the network to be a lot lighter and a lot faster as it manages data, right? So if you think about blockchains as generally just a way to manage data in an immutable and sequenced way, instead of having a sequential block after block, you have a hash graph that is more of a distributed ledger, right? So you're using gossip about gossip to ensure both that you maintain the highest level of security as the nodes manage consensus of the information and the data, but also you can do it in a very fast way. So a key thing about the Hedera network is that in addition to not requiring heavy electricity usage, it can still reach consensus with absolute finality in 3 to 5 seconds. There are a couple of core components of the Hedera network. So at its base, you have what's called the Hashgraph consensus, which is what I talked about in terms of how the network reaches consensus. And then we have 3 main services that sit on top of the network as well. So unlike, say, Avalanche, where it's you have 3 separate chains that kind of mix into one, this is one chain. There aren't any separate chains. It is just how we've packaged the code and allowed for developers to use these services in an easy and programmable way. So the first one is the consensus service. So the first one is the consensus service. So this one really is about acting as the kind of single source of truth for all the data that lands or that flows through the Hedera network. The second is the token service. So Hedera has a unique possibility where you can actually issue assets natively on the Hedera network. So you can actually tokenize things without making them a smart contract. And the benefit of this is that you can have the key benefits of the Hedera network, including its speed. So we mentioned 3 to 5 seconds to absolute finality, in addition to really low fees, right? These fees are predictable as well, in that they are fixed. So unlike Ethereum, where the fees will change based on the cost or congestion of the network, you can actually program in a business model around the predictable fees. So the tokenization aspect is something that we see as a key differentiator of the network. There are a couple of other networks that have native tokenization, but given Hedera's speed and fees, we do think that the tokenization on Hedera is quite unique. I think we talked about in the previous session auditing different types of tokens. On Hedera, you can do this. We would see fungible and non-fungible tokens issued as native assets. On the flip side, we have a smart contract service as well. So Hedera is a smart contract layer 1. It is also EVM compatible in the sense that our smart contracts are written in Solidity. And so what this means is that the network has both the opportunity for developers to issue assets natively, but also build in much more sophisticated applications using smart contracts. So things like DEXs or lending protocols or marketplaces are really focused on using our smart contract service. And so again, similar to the token service and just generally when you use the Hedera network, the key benefits around low fees that are predictable, in addition to the speed of the transactions, remain throughout all of these services. So we really think that the combination of the consensus service, the smart contract service, and the token service really bring in a very robust series of technologies and SDKs that developers can use. The key benefit that I should also mention is that the smart contract service and the consensus service and the token service all speak to one another. So you can issue tokens on the Hedera using the Hedera token service, and also have them applied through smart contract service as well. A couple of benefits just to mention. The theoretical transactions per second on Hedera, 10,000 plus. I think this month, I would say our average TPS is somewhere around like 12 or 1,300. So the network can definitely handle a lot of scale, which is good because the network itself has a lot of enterprises and organizations building, and necessarily as a result, they require huge amounts of scale. The average fee is 0.001. So again, like I mentioned, this is fixed and also quite low. So what this means is whether you send $1 or $10 million on Hedera, the fee will remain the same. Time to confirmation, 3 to 5 seconds. Again, when you compare with other kind of late or first gen or second generation networks, there is a significant benefit as well. Another key benefit of the network is that the network itself is very green in the sense that it's very sustainable. So as you can see here, a single Hedera transaction takes 1,000 times less energy than say Visa. And so I think a lot of the criticism around crypto networks in terms of their energy usage are ones that we understand, but aren't necessarily relevant to Hedera given its energy consumption. So one thing that we also talked about in the previous session regarding network governance is also something that's unique to the Hedera network. So the HBAR asset is not a governance token. It is a utility token. So you can use it to pay for things. You can use it to, pay for gas, transactions, all of those kind of key components of a utility token. The way that the network manages governance is through the governing council. So the governing council hosts up to 39 leading global organizations. I think as of right now, we have 29. There are a couple of interesting components that the governing council does. So they sit on 5 committees where they work on and debate and discuss and ultimately vote on the direction of the network. There is a committee on, there's a technical steering committee, there's one on treasury management and coin economics or token economics, there's one on legal and regulatory compliance, and there's one on marketing. There's also one on corporate utilization. So this is where the organizations like Aberdeen, like DLA Piper, like UCL, like LG, like Dell come together and talk about use cases that are both beneficial to their businesses, but also to their industries as well. And a key point, I think, also about the Hedera network is how decentralized the validator node is, or the validator nodes are. So as you can see, as of right now, they're really distributed across the world, both in terms of continents and also countries. And I think a key thing to highlight is the fact that 27 out of the 29 validator nodes right now run on unique service providers, in addition to the fact that no single service provider accounts for more than 7% of stake. So the reason that these stats are important is that, when you want to have a decentralized and robust network, you want to ensure that there isn't a single point of failure. And we've addressed that both in terms of the service providers in addition to control of stake. Should I pause for questions now or continue on for use cases? I do see a question in the chat.
We can see if there are questions in the audience or not, and we continue with the use cases maybe after.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. So in terms of real world use cases, this one was a hard section for me to put together just because there are so many, kind of very cool use cases. I just picked a handful of them kind of across the spectrum, but there definitely are quite a few that, are what I would say quite interesting and unique to Hedera. So as I mentioned, the token service on Hedera is very powerful, right? In addition to being very cheap and predictable and fast, the network itself is very scalable, right? So the amount of transactions you can push on the network without any sort of impacts to latency or speed are very high. So we see tokenization, and especially real world asset tokenization, as a key benefit and strength of the network. So one example of tokenization, of which we have many, is Aberdeen, who is a governing council member. So recently, they tokenized part of their 15 billion sterling money market fund. They used a team called Archax as their tokenization platform. And it really is interesting in the fact that Aberdeen, as a large wealth management fund, is moving so aggressively into crypto and DLT as a whole. And so we do really see the fact that tokenization will be a well-adopted technology solution for financial institutions who are looking to modernize and revolutionize the banking ecosystem. We also have a lot of kind of progress on the stablecoin front. So stablecoins, unlike volatile assets like the HBAR or ETH or Bitcoin, are pegged to stable value currencies. So the most common ones right now are pegged to the US dollar. If you've heard of USDC or USDT, you can also have stablecoins pegged to other currencies as well. And I think one key benefit of Hedera is that we've been able to expand the use of stablecoins outside of the US and outside of Europe. So most recently, Shinhan Bank, who is a member of the governing council, conducted a pilot with 2 other Asian financial institutions, one in Taiwan and one in Thailand called SCB Tech. And what they did is each bank issued a stablecoin in the native currency, so the Thai baht, Korean won, and New Taiwanese dollar. And then they conducted a FX swap, right? So they went from kind of Thai baht to New Taiwanese dollar to Korean won. And the benefit of this, all done on Hedera, are a couple of things, right? One is that with FX being on chain, it's 24/7, right? So you don't really have market closing. You don't observe traditional business operations. Because it's all code and tech, it can be 24/7. And so what that means is also from a liquidity perspective, it is a much stronger and more robust ecosystem and has the potential to do so. There are, I think, a couple of key business benefits as well for banks. The first is that the transaction itself took 2.5 seconds. Normally this transaction can take anywhere between 1 to 10 days. And the fee for the transaction was 5 cents. Normally it can be somewhere between $25 to $75. And so we're seeing magnitudes of efficiency in bringing these on-chain FX transactions on-chain, and especially onto Hedera because of the inherent benefits and speed of the network. The key benefit of stablecoins as well is something that we do see as something that will be adopted and as kind of the killer app within on-chain finance and within kind of the evolution of financial markets as well. And so very recently, I believe it was only 2 weeks ago, the ecosystem announced what's now called the Stablecoin Studio, which allows for issuers like Shinhan Bank or SCB Tech to issue assets very easily on Hedera. In fact, this pilot that I'm showing you right now utilized the, at the time, non-public Stablecoin Studio. The benefit of the Stablecoin Studio is that we've actually made it easy to architect stablecoins as hybrid assets. So remember how I talked earlier about the smart contract service and the token service. And so let's say in Ethereum, tokens are all ERC20 smart contracts, right? So they're quite heavy, they're quite slow, and they're quite expensive. And you compare that to, say, the Hedera token service, which is very light and very cheap. The benefit, though, of the smart contract service is that it's programmable, right? It's much more customizable. You can program in specific considerations that you want. And so we've been able to actually combine the smart contract service and the token service in a way that allows you to have hybrid assets. So you have the Hedera token as the base asset that is very light and very cheap. And then you can essentially have a smart contract wrapper on top of it that allows the issuer to program in considerations, whether it's KYC or compliance related. So generally, we're seeing stablecoins and the hybrid stablecoin architecture that that we've included as part of the Stablecoin Studio as a really important way for banks to start adopting stablecoins more broadly. As I mentioned, the network itself is, and I've probably mentioned this probably 10 times already, but because the network is so cheap and so fast, we also see Hedera as a key network for micropayments. We have a team called Drop that is doing just this, where they enable merchants to use Hedera for kind of real-time, consistent, and continuous micropayments. And we think that this use case really is quite strong because it takes the inherent benefits of the network and really applies it into a key business model. One thing that's been interesting about Drop is that they were recently included in the FedNow list of service providers. And so as banks are looking, or as financial institutions are looking to, kind of evolutionize and revolutionize their, their payment systems, they'll be exposed to partners like Drop who can really help them open up new business models. We also have an interesting use case with Fresh Supply Co. So Fresh Supply Co. is a supply chain digitization company. They work with leading banks and non-bank lenders to facilitate better access to capital when it comes to kind of supply chain management. They used to work on the Mastercard Provenance blockchain, but they've moved that all over to Hedera and will be incorporating the Mastercard payment gateway services to allow for kind of end-to-end payments, running on Hedera. And so this is one where we really see the evolution and the use cases in DeFi and stablecoins coming into play in a very real world use case as it comes to supply chain management. Another interesting use case we have in the financial sector is Zenny and ZennyPay. So Zenny is a travel ecosystem built on Hedera. They connect suppliers, airlines, hotels, car rentals, and activities into a no-code user-friendly platform. The key benefit here, of course, is that they also use Hedera and Hedera-based assets for payment. They also, I think, support Bitcoin and Ethereum as well. And so we really see Zenny as another example of where a traditional industry can definitely be improved upon using the technologies of crypto and Web3. And so what they've done is they've actually have Zenny as the travel ecosystem, and they have what's called ZennyPay, which is a reconciliation and settlement system built specifically for the travel industry, so that you can actually kind of take on the speed of crypto and high-speed transaction settlement as you are engaging within the travel industry. So we really think that this is a very cool kind of use where it's something that can be applied very easily for the end user. I think all of us, now, when we travel, when we book travel, when we book experiences, it's a very real and familiar experience that we have. And we see teams like Zenny really trying to take and keep hold of the classic experience that we're familiar with. You don't have to be crypto native to actually take part and use Zenny, but they are taking in a new technology that is crypto and that is Web3 and making it something that ultimately just benefits the end user. Sorry, I'm not sure why this isn't clicking in the right direction. Okay, here we go. So if we talked a lot about finance, we can talk a lot, almost even more about consumer engagement. So, I think when we think about our world right now, a lot of our interactions with brands and as a consumer are very monetized, right? And I think when we look at, how Web3 changes that, it really is about changing who owns those activities, right? In Web2, if those activities are owned primarily by brands, we see in Web3 that there is a shift and that people can have more control over who actually owns those incentives. So one team that currently is live on Hedera is a team called Karate Combat. Now, Karate Combat is a fighting league. They essentially are like MMA, but without, I believe, without grappling. And as a sporting league, they were one of the first to become a DAO, where both fans and athletes can own and have control over the future of their kind of organization and their community, or especially in this specific instance, their sports league. And they've done some very interesting things, right? So the Karate Combat kind of fighting league has a number of key fighters who have been famous in other MMA or other fighting leagues. And so they actually own the IP around those fighters, right? So you can have a fighter who, is like a legendary fighter, and you can actually sell that IP to, say, a gaming company who wants to create a game and include this fighter's profile as part of that game. And the benefit of Karate Combat being a DAO is that now the loyal fans and even the athletes have a cut of that IP and that monetization. And so we've actually seen this kind of happen in real time, right? So Karate Combat has a fighting league. We have a team called Game On who has taken the Karate Combat IP and built a game around that. We've seen kind of conversations around avatars and the creation of avatars so that people can create and collect avatars of their favorite fighters. And we're also seeing a very interesting experiment between a physical and digital experience. So Karate Combat actually hosts real in-person fights. They've had one in Miami. I believe they have one in Vegas coming up. And as you watch these fights, you can actually engage in up-only betting through the Karate Combat app using the Karate token. And so this really kind of creates a new experience for spectators who are both watching the game in person, but also engaging with the IP and the fighters and the DAO, online and on-chain. We are also starting to see Web3 become a very viable technology for brands as they engage with their consumers. So one very interesting opportunity that we had was with Starburst and a team called Bamboo Meta. So Starburst this April at South by Southwest hosted a booth where they talked about kind of their kind of new products and kind of who they are as a company. People who came by the Starburst booth at South by Southwest were airdropped or were essentially dropped a proof of attendance protocol, which essentially is an NFT that has certain kind of characteristics that either show that you attended this event and maybe there is some incentive to do something else after you attend this event and you have this NFT. Now, Bamboo Meta is unique in that you can actually put the NFT directly into your Apple or Android wallet. And so it really kind of makes the experience very familiar for a Web2 or non-crypto native consumer. And so as you see on the left side, what happened was you receive a proof of attendance protocol in your Android wallet that allows you to do a couple of things. The first is enter Starburst Juicyverse, which is the metaverse that Starburst has created on Hedera. Once you enter the Juicyverse, you can then get coupons and kind of benefits for you when you actually buy, say, your Starburst in Rite Aid. And that's exactly what happened in this scenario where you receive your proof of attendance protocol, you enter the Juicyverse, and then you go and you buy, kind of like a roll of Starburst candy. And as a result, you get a discount on the Starburst. So, you kind of have that closed loop cycle of incentives. From a consumer brand perspective, it also then provides you with more information on the consumer, right? Because now I can see where that consumer actually bought that roll of Starburst. I can see they bought it somewhere in Pennsylvania. And so what we're seeing is that the consumer engagement opportunities that are built on networks like Hedera really are viable technologies that consumer brands can now use as they engage with their customers. Another very interesting use case we have is Atma.io. So this platform is built by Avery Dennison. It's the way where you can actually record the product lifecycle events, such as creation, shipping, and sale, all in a very kind of immutable and verifiable history. Now, the benefit of this is that now Atma.io is a single source of truth for products' origins. What's been very interesting for us is that we actually see large companies like Avery Dennison use technology like Atma.io to also be more green and meet their ESG goals. And so, we can see them trace carbon emissions around these products and these items. That also allows them to monetize that as well, right? As they release carbon credit tokens and carbon emission tokens as well. So we can actually see Atma.io as a microcosm of technology and how technology opens up new business models for well-established companies. Another key benefit of Atma is that because I think they hash something, or they connect something like 4 billion IoT devices, they really are pushing, kind of a huge amount of transactions onto the Hedera network. And it's a key piece of evidence that, the Hedera network as a technology is so sound that it actually can, can support these crazy and very real world needs that large enterprises have when it comes to kind of bringing their existing business models on chain or like into Web3 or crypto. So those are just a couple of key use cases. We have a very interesting one in healthcare called Health Ready that allows you to, better incentivize actually, what do you call them? Clinical trials for kind of rare diseases. I think we talked earlier about the role of tokenomics when it comes to incentives. We definitely see that as something that's important within the healthcare industry. It also allows you to have verifiable proof around the around the results of clinical trials. We have interesting, I think most recently Hyundai announced that they will be putting their sustainable markets and sustainable supply chain system on Hedera as well. So we have a lot of very, very cool use cases on Hedera that really are addressing real world problems, whether they're in the financial sector, whether they're in consumer engagement, or whether they're in kind of the ESG world. But yeah, I think those are kind of a good kind of spectrum of the use cases that we currently have live on Hedera. So when we talk about kind of challenges and opportunities that we see, we really just are focused on 3 key areas because we see these as the biggest envelope pushers. The first is on-chain finance, right? So how does Hedera, how does crypto actually provide infrastructure to enable organizations to build businesses, right? So how do we actually enable them to update their business models? And so we see these with things like the Shinhan Bank stablecoin pilot. We see this with like the Fresh Supply Co. and how they're revolutionizing how they essentially do agriculture lending. We see this with kind of even very traditional financial applications like lending and swapping, on-chain FX, and even of course payments and remittance, right? So we definitely see stablecoins and crypto networks as kind of the next phase of cross-border remittances. We see a key area of kind of progress in ecosystem as a service, right? So how does a consumer brand actually provide a Web3 experience to their consumer in a way that also benefits them as an organization? So from our perspective, we see huge opportunity for you to enable plug and play technology in things like gaming, metaverse, NFT, loyalty and rewards, and even identity that will allow for consumer brands to engage in a much more fair but also meaningful way with their consumers. And we also see key benefits like we talked about with Atma when it comes to sustainable markets and how building in ESG goals and using technology to meet those goals can actually open up business models and new business models for these existing companies. So creating the open source infrastructure that accelerates the time to market for these applications, in addition to addressing key sustainability challenges that are ultimately good for our world. So I think in terms of those 3 areas, we definitely see those as the key opportunities of both the Hedera network, but also our ecosystem as a whole. And then I believe that actually is the last slide, and we can open up for questions.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Elaine, for your fantastic presentation. I think we need to address one question in the Q&A first. I think Andrew asked whether there will be a node in Australia.
I believe there is a node in Australia. Oh, perhaps not. I believe that so on the governing council right now, yeah, I'm trying to actually think why there isn't a node in Australia. I don't actually have the answer to that. I think generally we are looking to have as much distribution from a geographic perspective. Um, from a governance perspective, we do have representation from Australia. I believe FPOS is a governing council member, and they're based in kind of the Australia, New Zealand region as well. But yes, I think that the location of the validator node is really dependent on the governing council's that specific member's decision on where they want to place the node.
I see, that makes sense. I was actually asked by one of their colleagues when I met them at one of the events previously, and they asked me which one is my favorite Hedera use case. I'd like to ask that question back to you as well, and see which one, which ones are your favorite ones for the use cases and applications.
Yeah, that's a really challenging question, I think. And you can call me fickle, but I think my favorite kind of changes, pretty frequently. One thing that's very top of mind is the stablecoin studio that was announced during Token 2049. And the reason I like it is that there's so much that can be built on stablecoins. And I really think that stablecoins are the angle in when it comes to on-chain finance, and really using Hedera to update and improve upon an existing financial ecosystem. And so if you think about our world right now, kind of the amount of money that flows that's either like priced in the dollar or the euro or what have you is just immense, right? Now imagine all of that activity, all of that flow of money happening through stablecoins. That really is just a massive, massive opportunity. And so the ability that we've created that allows you to issue assets in a hybrid way, that allows and provides the issuer more control, we really think will start to accelerate what we're already seeing in terms of the and what we expect to see as like a proliferation of more stable coins, right? So I think even maybe a month ago, PayPal's announcement of PayPal USD, I would imagine that other corporations and other financial ecosystems are looking at that as a viable option for them to consider as well, right? Like imagine if like Apple issued a stable coin, right? So it's a really just easy flow of value and transfer of value within the Apple ecosystem, whether it's through your laptop or phone or, Apple Pay or all of these different kind of gateways that have already been created. So I think that is really one where, I think we're just entering the 2.0 era of stablecoins, and we'll really start to see kind of that expand. And I think what's really interesting and what Hedera has positioned itself quite well on is over the last 10 years, the stablecoin ecosystem has really been focused around the US dollar and the euro. Now, we think that we'll start to see kind of a Cambrian explosion of stablecoins in emerging markets, especially in those areas where we see cross-border remittance and payment and like mobile payments as something that's kind of better entrenched and more ingrained within like the financial literacy. And so we do think that we'll see a lot more growth outside of the dollar and the euro markets.
Okay, great, thank you. And then it does bring me on to thinking about the kind of asset management and the financial applications that you mentioned earlier. For example, Aberdeen you mentioned, but there are other types of asset management companies out there, right? They manage all types of different assets. And the kind of benefit I heard utilizing the different types of DLT is that they can arbitrarily divide up the assets, and it opened up to smaller investors, not only large investors. So it kind of benefits the kind of social equality and open up the access of investing in those type of assets that is not accessible to other people. Do you think that is one of the benefits out there, and how do you think Hedera would be kind of the go-to option to be applied in that case? I mean, over other kind of blockchain technologies as such.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm so glad you brought it up because, one, I think, interesting aspect of real-world asset tokenization is how it's applied to industries like real estate, right? Which is definitely where the fractionalization that you're talking about comes into play. So yeah, we definitely see it as a really, there are benefits when it comes to things like better financial access to like marginalized populations or even like smaller investors, right? Who might not have $10 million to invest in corporate real estate, but maybe have like $10,000 that they can contribute. So the ability to tokenize that real estate opportunity or investment opportunity and then have that fractionalize into, like you were describing, smaller amounts that essentially opens up the investor population, I think is definitely something that's quite interesting. We definitely see that quite a bit in the real estate market. I think that's been probably one of the early industries where we've seen that concept take into play. We have a couple of real estate teams actually working on Hedera. One of them is Red Swan, and they're doing exactly that. So we do see it as a very viable option.
Yeah, okay. So the second part of the question was really to see whether how Hedera can win over other options out there to be used and to be the go-to solution, shall we say, for the factorization and tokenization of those kind of assets. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the key really is around so there are two benefits or two kind of differentiators. One is from a technical perspective, and then one is from a kind of, I would say, like business perspective, right? So from a technical perspective, the Hedera token service is a very powerful engine for tokenization. And so when you are building out kind of investment vehicles like real estate, you want to have both a powerful but also a flexible tech stack. And the Hedera token service is exactly that, right? It's flexible in the sense that you can combine it with either the smart contract service or the consensus service to ensure that you can program in what you need, whether it's a hybrid asset or kind of other protections around that particular asset. But it's also flexible from a sense that at the bare, kind of like at the bare minimum, we have built these SDKs to be very developer friendly, right? So it really is very malleable code that each kind of organization or kind of dev shop can use and learn and kind of mold to their own will. The second thing is from a business perspective, right? So I've talked quite a lot about fees. And the reason that the low transaction fees on Hedera and the fact that these fees are predictable is important is because from a business model perspective, it not only allows you to forecast what costs you will incur, but essentially allows you to also save money, right? Because if you were to use another network, you would be incurring kind of not only at a baseline drastically higher cost, but also one's costs that are unpredictable. And so from a kind of technical and also a like fee and cost perspective, the network itself has been designed to be very usable for enterprises and institutions who are looking to build sustainable businesses on top of the network. Now, of course, that's not to, that's just even ignoring like the benefits of the governing council and the stability that type of governance brings to the ecosystem. But in terms of comparing ourselves to other opportunities and other networks, I do think from a technical and like a business model perspective, we really are the only network that has taken into consideration how companies actually organize themselves and build new products.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for your answer. I don't want the audience to think that this is an interview rather than a webinar. But we've allowed a bit of time for people to come up with their questions. And if we give a last minute for people to ask their questions, if not, then I would like to thank you very much, Elaine, for your fantastic presentation about this comprehensive ecosystem around Hedera, from the basics and around the Hedera and token itself, to use cases, particular applications, and also the opportunities and challenges going forward as well, and to Stellanosis as well for a new branch, right, for tokenomics auditing. So I'll maybe stop the recording now and see if there will be more questions coming in the chat or not.